let's continue with that's like Woodrow Wilson's like policy tried to like get into to like try to become like more get a more peaceful for all the 14 points basically didn't fall flat, and mainly because there's also another provision by to give like money to Germany in order for it to rebuild and like become stable again. However, the UK and France were like against it because Germany, they were at war with Germany and they wanted tougher penalties on Germany and stuff. And they let them to do on a lot of very bad payments. And like the Treaty of Versailles was eventually really tough on Germany. They lost a lot of land. They lost than expected. They were supposed to pay like $33 billion in reparations, which was like very big and like led to high inflation in Germany. Like $1 in 1919 equals 4.5 German marks, but in 1923, $1 equals like to 2 trillion 2 trillion marks, and like lots of stuff where it was like crazy inflation there. So like many people got, obviously it was a very tough situation for Germany then. So like that was something the Allies in like the tough situation eventually led to Adolf Hitler exploiting the economic struggles of Germans, and like he was able to get support from them. So like that's what happened. The Treaty of Versailles led to World War II. So like and like the US Senate never approved of it because of like how they saw it was too much, and like they were that, and like they wanted to be isolationist of the country, and like they didn't want it. And like they also refused to join the League of Nations, which was proposed by Woodrow Wilson. And like that, the League of Nations was like a weak form of the UN, meaning it didn't do much for the countries other than have them talk and do stuff. And like they just suggest, and they can only give suggestions, not like actually enforce anything. So like that's like something there. So like foreign policy wise, Woodrow Wilson tried to make the US more towards kind of more involved in the world, though like in but like it opposite happened, and like the US became less involved. And the US in general was fearing like the rise of communism and socialism during this period. And like many of the progressives in the country were socialists and communists. Like as to in 1900s and 1910s, many of them became more social. Many people favored socialism more and communism more because like it was like progressive ideas that were helping workers. However, World War I ended all that idea of progressive, and like many people say the progressive era, which lasted from 1900s, ended in World War I because of like how many socialists and communists were opposed because Russia became communist at this time. So like they overthrew their own Tsar, and like eventually Lenin took power, and like that was during World War I. And like they were and like the US was fearing Russia. Actually, they didn't even recognize Russia until 1933 with Franklin Roosevelt for World War II and like stuff. So like that was like the only reason. And like they were fearing communists. So like the first Red Scare was happening during this time. So like Sacco and Vanzetti was a major case. Like that was like something that I talked about in 1920. I continued in 1920s. They were Italian immigrants that were that. So like and like basically it was like all this fear of communism, and like the US was being overwhelmed by it. So like that was something. And like 1919 was also a major year for race riots and stuff. That was like the first year of any racial tension, right? It's like basically some radical African Americans who wanted freedom suddenly went to the streets, and then and then at this time the Ku Klux Klan was there as well, and like all those stuff. So like there was all and like they were fighting each other, and like it was leading to lots of deaths and chaos in the cities of the country, including in Detroit, in like New York, Los Angeles, Detroit, all those stuff. So like that was a major thing that occurred. Or, uh, And then like finally like the last thing like the progressive legislation here this part like there's four major amendments that were actually passed in this time period. So like 16th Amendment, which was the income tax. So like before then, like the US was like getting a lot of tax revenue from consumer products, like alcohol to be specific. Like, and then like the income tax was there to make sure, and like it was a graduated income tax, meaning like the richer you are, the more you pay in taxes. That concept, and like that was a progressive concept, and like the income tax basically taxed your income and like gave a small proportion to the government. This increased revenue for the government overall. All and then like the 17th Amendment, which was the direct election of senators. So like senators at the time, they were like elected by state representatives and not like the people itself. And like the 17th Amendment changed that and like made that the people can now choose their senator, like they choose their president, like they choose their House of Representatives. So like that was something there. And then 18th Amendment, we talked about the effects of prohibition in 1920s. It was first passed in this, and like the World War I was the final straw between it, because like Briere was mainly German and like many people wanted to go against Germany and stuff. So like that was like kind of the reason why prohibition went into effect during World War I, because many opposition to alcohol came, and like that was like the thing. And then like 19th Amendment, this was 1920s, so like it really moved in 1910s, because by then by its passage, half the states were already approving women to vote in its elections, like all over the country. In 1910s, they were able to expand it, and like overall, they were able to do it. And like all these, you may think Woodrow Wilson may have to have a play in it and make, and because these are some good things, some of these, at least some of them, but like these amendments are different from laws, because laws were made had to be made by Congress and like approved by the president. But like amendments, these are like added to the Constitution itself, meaning like the Congress has to approve it. However, states have to approve it, meaning the state governments have to approve it as well. Well, and like they have a higher threshold in both them. So like that would, it's really tough to make an amendment. So like most people just make laws. So like, and like that's the 1910s, and like eventually, because Woodrow Wilson was not that good, man, Republicans took back in power in 1920, and like that's led to 1920s. And like that's basically it.
Okay. Well, that's a very exhaustive presentation. When I say exhaustive, what I meant is very lengthy and covering presentation. Pictures were very short. At the same time, it had been so descriptive. A couple of questions I would like to ask you, Achyut. Point number one, 13th Amendment was during Lincoln time, I believe, and
Yeah.
he has been very, very keen in terms of getting the Americans out of slavery. And his bill and the ordinance that he wanted to pass with regard to reducing the slavery, it took a lot of hassle, it took a lot of risk, and he was a kind of a very docile and a very submissive president, not as staunch as the people who were, in the early era of his own self. Like it was not like John Kennedy, or it was not like Bush Senior, Bush Junior, or anybody else. But then he made it possible. And unfortunately, after the amendment was made possible, in another 5 or 6 days, he got shot and assassinated him. My question is, after the slavery, and in the 1900s presentation that you made, we were having the evils like bribery, trust. I really like that picture, people wearing that evil hats, bribery. Then we had the trust, the bad trusts, and untrustworthy trusts and all that.
Well,
How do you think, although a person like Lincoln, who has taken a lot of steps to take Americans out of slavery, still these kinds of evil aspects caught hold of America? These things were even more dangerous than slavery in the 1900s. And how did this actually happen? Was it because of poor leadership, or was it because of any poor dictatorship, or was it a need of dictatorship? How did this happen? Because America kept on, falling into some troubles. Uh, Only after your presentation, I came to understand that it kept on looking into looming troubles. As a presenter, what is your thoughts on this, and how did this happen?
Um, one thing is like the one misunderstanding that many people have in general is like how Lincoln was super popular, or like
Mhm.
and he's popular today because like he ended slavery and all that. But like if you go into back into 1860s during the time, Lincoln was
Mm.
not that popular in between the people. Like he got barely enough votes to get elected in 1860, and then like in 1864 he barely won against the, so he got like 55% of the vote and 55 to 45, so like 45% was against him, and that too only in the north, so like that's a very significant amount of people. And like in the south, like forever, like the Confederacy, like all those stuff of the dictatorship, like you talked about, came through the military presence of the Union people who basically took control of the Southern governments, and like they basically took over it and like made these reforms to help African Americans go and get better lives and stuff. So like that's like the so like that dictatorship was working. However, it was weakening so fewer because
Mm.
like because many of resistance, I guess, like as more of these dictatorships forced dictatorships, like many people felt like they lost their southern pride, and Lincoln's approach was actually seen as the better way. And like
Mm.
Lincoln advocated for a less like militaristic, more like tried to gain their feelings and like try to give them like aid and stuff, and like make sure they get pardoned, and like not enforced majorly, but like unfortunately like Lincoln's uh Lincoln's plan didn't go into effect, and like a more radical form of Republicans came, and like they became more dictatorship. So like the left, so like less dictatorship, it may have been different. Probably the South would have been more in
Mm.
thing, more like Lincoln didn't knew like it was gonna be impossible to get African Americans to get every right then, like because like it was gonna be tough to get over
Mm.
everyone. However, he wanted to get one step at a time, and like he wanted to make get the South reunited overall through like peace and stuff. However, the radical Republicans went hardline dictatorship, and like that turned many Southerners opposed to them, and eventually they were able to kick them out and start their own ideas. And like the
Right.
pride thing about the and like the Southern pride was actually being repressed for a long while in the 1880s and 1890s, like there was laws, and then like Southern pride really didn't come back till like 1900. So like it was, and that's like 50 years after the war or something. That's when Southerners like pulled all those Confederate statues and stuff, started replacing their textbooks to educate children about the glories of it. And like that's 50 years. Like what is that? Why is it suddenly coming back? So it was because of like all those it was because of all their fathers, like their fathers, the next generation fathers, like they were in 1870s and 1860s, and like they were first hand describing
Mm.
what they were seeing after the Civil War, and like they were being upset about it. So like their
Mm.
children, which was like in the 1900s and 1910s, began to start implementing these policies is to make sure their children knows about it, because like they wanted to preserve the glory of the Confederacy and stuff of so
Right.
like if they have been less dictatorial, I think like Lincoln's approach was little come more compassionate. It would have been a lot slower though. Like I think it may have achieved a little better result.
Mm.
I don't know, but like it's history is really complicated, but like it could happen.
Right. Right. Well, then, Having got the expertise and exposure of presenting all these century information about United States of America, as a presenter, you have done an extensive research. I tell you, now this could be giving you a platform of learning as to how to research about history, and you have done that for several weeks now, and you have just finished the presentation today, and this is the third or fourth time that you are, touching the tail of it. My question is, as a presenter and as a researcher per se, which century do you really admire? And in which century do you really think America was self sufficient? What's your opinion and why?
20th century, I think would be like the America becoming self-admired. It mainly because that's like there's not a lot of centuries America was in. Like 18th century America was being built, like it just started. So like there's an and like 21st we don't know yet, but like China and like India and other countries are growing up to match American like economic strength and like labor force. And like the
Mm,
US is increasing aging. So like I wouldn't say 21st. But like
mm,
19th and 20th are the only
mm,
major options left. And like 19th, although like America was expanding west and stuff and that, it was still like flagging behind the European economies in like some other ways. Like it
mm,
wasn't until the 1898 when Spanish American Civil War, I
mm,
mean the Spanish American Wars came, like that really showed like the US was able to win against the European in
mm,
power.
mm,
Like it was able to defeat Spain in that
mm,
war. And then so like in 20th century, but
mm,
the 20th century would be definitely the most useful because like America, especially the first half, like America at the start of 19, like they only became the world's largest economy around 1920. And like that
mm,
was and they were starting to get involved in wars like World War One and then eventually World War Two. And like
mm,
they became the main s- combatter in the Cold War against the Soviet Union. So like that was
mm,
like the major thing think so like
mm,
America was rising during that time because and like it was the first to make nuclear weapons. It was the first to get advanced in computer technologies. It was creating all this stuff of and it was
mm,
paving the way for the world to go. Oh, and like a lot of a lot of immigration was happening in America. There's lots of all those stuff was really happening in the 1950s and 60s and then like 70s and 80s it was all this stuff. And like it was eventually 1990s when Soviet Union collapsed, the US claimed was able to kind of claim victory to the Cold War, which was like a
mm,
major achievement, and the US became the only superpower in the world by the end of the 20th century. And like so like the 20th century was when the US definitely like improved a whole ton. Like the 19th was a good step in the process, but 19th century was like a small line, but like 20th, shoop, it went up like anything USA.
okay. All right. Last and final question. What is the current threat you are seeing in 21st century? Because we still have about 70 plus years to complete 21st century. And, with the extensive research that you have done about USA, what are the current threats that USA is facing in the 21st century? We have been speaking about China several times, but apart from China, China is definitely it's a trouble at the rear end. But then, what are the other threats do you think that America has to really roll the fist on for the rest of the 77 years left in 21st century?
Hmm. So like America, right now, like America, like the social, like with the made of the internet and social media, like everything has been changing. Kids are more going towards digital phones and like schools are now implementing them. And you see this with Trump and Biden now, then now all these political things, like once like they were broadcast separately and like it was on private, now the
Mm,
public has access to a lot of their screenings and stuff, and like the news are becoming that. And like many people are becoming untrustworthy of the news because like they're trying to compete for like ratings and stuff, and like they were getting into partisan sides, so like they were getting increasingly partisan. Like there's some news networks that are supporting right-wing people candidates.
Mm.
Some news networks were supporting left-wing candidates. Like, and overall, the news is becoming, in general, less trustworthy because of this trend. Because of like how like it wasn't straight news. Like in the 20th century, it was straight, but like 21st, it was now that. And like all this social media only furthers the communication because Twitter and like Facebook, they're able to like post anything, and like this is like creating like this new trend of like lots of untrust and stuff, and like many people are now not trusting anything. Like all of many institutions are facing what is their worst approval ratings in a long time.
Right,
Like
right,
there's global competition as well, like with China and like that, and like America is getting increasingly divided over it. Like even in the election, like in like that happened like 2 months ago or something. Like the results show like Democrats controlling 51% of the seats in the Senate versus Republicans 49. That's a 51-49 split.
mm,
Republicans control 51% of the House, and
mm,
40 Democrats control 49% of the House, which is a very big even split. And the
right,
governor races, 26 Republicans control 52% of the governor races. Democrats
mm,
control 48% of it. So like that's
mm,
these are all very close margins, and like even the popular vote, like in 2020 for president, it was 51% Joe Biden, 47% Trump. Like it's like there's typically historically these would be very close elections. So like many people are saying this was a convincing victory for Biden, a 4 point
yeah,
victory. That was like a May. So like you can see like the polarization and like
mm,
there's also a lot of these political threats, and like there's like all this chaos was suddenly returning. Like yes, for to elect the speaker of the house, they took 4 days. Congress took 4 days to elect the speaker.
right,
That's like really like that's not normal. Oh, like
right,
it's the first time since 1860s that's happened. And like 1860s, you can understand back then, like they had all those limited technologies, and like during the time Civil War was happening, and
yes,
like all those, which was a struggle. But now like now this shouldn't be happening in America, and yet it is. And then like it's all that. So like this is like the major concern for America is obviously like all this political threat. That's
right,
and like it shouldn't lead to more like major chaos and violence. Like there's all this increase in crime and like throughout the US cities and like stuff. And like
mm,
many of the cities are now compare you can compare many of these cities to now some of the most like some of the most like deadliest country is in the
mm,
world. So like you can compare the stats, like they're comparable with each other. They're similar, like these cities. Like in San Francisco, for example, people in the city, like people often like have their trunks open, like to show
right,
like they have no valuables in the car so they won't get breaking, because San Francisco is facing that major problem. And
right,
like with the political tensions, like nothing is being done about it. And like although it will decrease naturally and increase again like inflation and like all those stuff, it's like
mm,
it's still uncertainty in the future, which was like the main concern here. So like all
mm,
this politicians and stuff, they're creating like this really weird stuff. They're creating this really like unpredictable thing first, and like it's just gonna be made by chaos of political conflict all over the
right,
country. Like you saw January 6th, like that's political conflict right there. You saw
mm,
all those stuff, like Democrats are attacking Republicans. Like though that's like the major thing that's happening to America right now. And it could be a shift towards something in the future. But like America right now, if it's struggling to not solve its own problems, then like it can't lead the world like in stuff. of like
Absolutely.
it's gonna be weakened in the world, especially when like China, it's unified under the Communist Party.
Mm.
India, it seems to be united. BJP seem to have a good grasp of power by now, and like all this,
Yeah.
like the China and India, Russia obviously is united right now, and like Russia, although it's struggling in Ukraine right now, big time. I mean, you couldn't still rule out it as a power, like still a power in its own right, and it's causing these energy stuff shortages in like European countries, and like
Mm.
with the internal conflict, like you like there's already conflict of whether Ukraine should get all this spending and like that, and it will delay spending for Ukraine, and like it will delay what it actually needs to be. Like that's a good conversation to have, like whether you want to
Mm.
give Ukraine this much or like that much, but
Mm.
like eventually Ukraine would need something because like
Mm.
US because like Ukraine relies on the US, like Germany and Italy and like France, they're not giving enough to Ukraine. Like only the US is giving. If the US is off the map for
Mm.
Ukraine, then like Ukraine will struggle against Russia. But
Mm.
like it was Ukraine is getting this far because of the US and like that. But like if it's increased political tensions and the US does it there, then like it will create an opportunity for like bigger countries to like China,
Right.
Russia, India to overcome the US as in
Right.
these things, which is like that. Even in a Russian textbook on how to invade the world, they know like they couldn't physically defeat the US in militarily. So like they
Mhm.
wanted to give tensions like domestically. So like they wanted political chaos and stuff. They wanted Russia to do that. And
Yeah.
like that's what's happening right now. There's chaos politically the US. So like that's like the best position for them to gain power. So like that's what's
Yeah.
happening. That's like the chaos that's happening. So like this political tension is like the most thing it was decisive in the US.
All right. All right. So nice presentation, Achyut. So I learned a lot of things, and there were lots of corrections that happened in the mind when, specifically, when you're speaking about the 1910s, where right from having a piece of bread, having a slice of bread, till having their freedom of expression of thoughts, everything was under struggle for Americans. Although they look like a super country and having a lot of liberal effects of their righteousness and all that. But only when we go back deep down into the history, we get to know that they have been coming across a very, very rough patch of path, and they have emerged successful, and they are standing as a superpower. Yes, of course. They had their own privileges sometimes, economically and in terms of leadership wise. But at the same time, they have always been remaining as a dominant inspiration for plenty of other countries, at least to an extent of 100 or 150 countries in the entire globe, because of three reasons. Reason number one, mostly America was having or holding pioneer leadership. And reason number two, their economic status was always good, and they had never been gone into the drenched level of inflation or deflation either. That's the second reason. And the
Yeah.
third reason is uh, at one point of time, they started embracing the black, right? So if you could see in 1990s or 1980s, the black Americans were the first force against the white Americans. And right now, after Obama's time, things have changed, and the the unison of the black Americans and white Americans have been a stupendous power right now. So there are plenty of other reasons why America is a superpower. So in addition to that, your extensive research had been so much informative. Good
Mhm.
job, Achyut. Very
Thank
well
you,
done.
sir.
So we will be meeting next week, and if at all your academics are coming as an inter, you know as an inter in, as an interruption for the preparation, you can do a presentation on your own. What do you think? Will you be able to make the presentation of the topic that we discussed last time before Christmas?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, okay, all right. Fine. One last start. I wanted to take 2 minutes to ask about this. What's your opinion on Ronaldo taking into Al Nassr?
He needs to retire somewhere. So like, and it's a good. I mean, like, in Saudi, Al Nassr is giving a lot of money for him. So like, it's good for him. Like,
Made a
he need,
fortune. He really made a fortune of it.
yeah, like since his age is only his age is like preventing him from like getting into other clubs because like he's going to have to retire in 2 to 3 years. Like they're so like European clubs are not approving of him. So like they have it's like you have to give it. So now like Ronaldo has to go somewhere. Like Saudi Arabia, it's a good country to retire in. Like it's a really like it's not a rich country. It's like some people face like struggling conditions there, like Ronaldo, since he's like already in the elite part gets good money in Saudi Arabia. So like they'll get
Right.
a good living there and like he can retire there.
Right. Right. But, he's still not playing. Even in the recent match, he was not playing. He's still having the ban. The ban is not lifted. That breaking some fans' cell phone
Oh
issues,
yes.
sitting out. Even after all this glory, he's sitting out. And one more match to go, and then only we will have to see. I was just curious to know your thoughts about this. That's why.
He just needs to retire, so it's fine.
Absolutely. So maybe he's trying to compensate for his World Cup's terrible loss, and he wants to finish with a feel-good factor. We will have to wait and see if that's happening.
Yeah, Messi is also considering a move to US, to
All right.
Miami, which is like
Correct.
something as like a retirement. Like Pele moved to the US to retire
Yes. Yeah.
as well, and he died last year, right?
Last year. Right. Right. Yeah. Okay, Harshit. Very well done.
Yeah.
So we'll meet next week, and we will have the presentation. And a couple of people have joined. One from Chennai, another one from Bangalore. These people have joined in the online classes. So they are attending again, just like you. They are in weekend classes. They are attending at 3 o'clock in the evening, IST. That's midnight for you. And so I'm trying to pull those. Yeah, I'm trying to pull those people to your time. Maybe 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning for you. I'll update about that next week.
Okay,
I'm
sir.
just talking. I'll update about it. Okay. All right, Achut.
All right.
So thank you so much. See you next week.
See you
Bye.
next week, sir. Bye.
Yeah. Yeah. Bye. Bye.